A racist police officer openly uses violence and crude language to insult a black woman solely because of her skin color. However, he is utterly shocked when her true identity is revealed. His career begins to falter, and the mask of a corrupt system starts to crumble. This confrontation is about reclaiming personal justice and a battle against a deeply unjust society. Before we begin, please subscribe to our channel to join us for more shocking and unmissable stories. Naomi Harper, a seasoned FBI agent, drove into the crowded parking lot of the Westview Mall on a scorching summer afternoon. She only intended to pick up a birthday gift for her nephew before heading home, unaware that a fateful encounter awaited her. Naomi parked her car in a legal spot near the entrance. With her cautious nature, she always double-checked the surrounding signs to ensure she wasn't violating any rules. But as soon as she stepped out of her car, she noticed a police cruiser parked nearby. Police Chief Jordan Mills, a tall man with an air of self-importance, was leaning against the vehicle, his scrutinizing gaze fixed on Naomi. "Hey, stop right there." His voice rang out, authoritative yet laced with hostility. Naomi turned around, maintaining her composure, trying to understand why she'd been called out. "Is there an issue, officer?" Naomi asked, her tone calm but wary. "You parked in the wrong spot. Move your car, or I'll have it towed," Mills said, his eyes flashing with contempt behind his sunglasses. Naomi frowned and glanced back at her car. The spot was entirely legal, with no prohibited signs in sight. "I believe this spot is valid. I checked before parking." Mills stepped closer, a smirk playing on his lips. "Don't think you can argue with me. Do as I say, or I'll handle it myself." Despite the heavy tension and the growing attention from passers-by, Naomi stood her ground. "Officer, I haven't broken any laws. If you'd like to verify, I'm happy to cooperate, but I don't believe you can force me to move without a legitimate reason." Mills grew visibly angry, his face flushing red. "Who do you think you are, arguing with my orders? I'm tired of dealing with people like you, always thinking they're above the law." His words, dripping with racial undertones, cut into Naomi like a blade. She clenched her fists, trying to remain calm, but the sense of injustice and humiliation made her blood boil. "Sir, I'm not trying to cause trouble. If you'd like to see my documentation, I can provide it, but I won't move without legal justification," Naomi replied, her voice firm yet controlled. Mills, ignoring her explanation, stormed toward Naomi's car and opened the door. "Get out of the car, right now, or I'll drag you out myself." Before Naomi could respond, Mills grabbed her arm and yanked her forcefully. She stumbled and fell to the ground, her knees scraping against the hot asphalt. Gasps and murmurs erupted from the growing crowd, with many pulling out their phones to record the scene. "Was that necessary?" a voice from the crowd questioned. "Do you think you're special?" Mills shouted, his eyes blazing with hostility. "Get up and put your hands on the hood." Naomi slowly rose to her feet, her eyes reddened but filled with determination. She stared directly at Mills, unafraid but wary. "You have no idea what you're doing." Mills laughed mockingly. "I don't care who you are. To me, you're just another person of color thinking you're better than everyone else." Naomi didn't respond, but Mills's words solidified her understanding of the unjust system she was up against. The crowd around them continued filming, and Naomi knew this encounter was far from over. However, one thing was clear to her. This was not just an ordinary confrontation. It was the beginning of a much larger battle. Naomi returned to her small apartment as dusk settled, the amber glow of the sunset streaming through the window. Her coat was covered in dirt, and her knees were swollen from the fall, but none of that compared to the simmering rage burning inside her. Sitting down at her desk, she took a deep breath to calm herself. She couldn't let emotions cloud her judgment. Not now. The memories replayed relentlessly in her mind. Mills's contemptuous gaze, his arrogant, racist remarks, and the silence of the crowd around her. Naomi knew this wasn't the first time Mills had acted this way, and if she didn't act, it certainly wouldn't be the last. Naomi pulled out her phone, scrolling through her contacts until she landed on a familiar name. Marcus Reed. He was one of her most trusted colleagues at the FBI, someone who had stood by her side in many major cases. Without hesitation, Naomi called Reed and recounted the incident. "Meet me at the office right now," Reed said, his voice low and serious. In Reed's private office at FBI headquarters, Naomi sat across from her longtime partner. Reed, a tall man with sharp eyes and a warm smile, now looked completely serious. He listened to Naomi's story without interruption, his expression growing grimmer with each detail. "Jordan Mills," Reed repeated, enunciating each word when Naomi finished. "That guy isn't just some ordinary cop. He's notorious for abusing his authority, but he always gets away with it. Do you know why?" Naomi shook her head, her eyes filled with caution. "Because he's protected," Reed said, leaning back in his chair. "Not just by his colleagues, but by people higher up. This isn't just about Mills, Naomi. He's just a pawn in a much larger web of corruption." Naomi narrowed her eyes, the tension in her chest increasing. "What do you mean? Are you talking about people in the police department?" "It's not just the police department," Reed replied, leaning forward. "I've heard rumors about secret deals, massive amounts of money flowing in from shady businesses. Mills and some other officers are the ones carrying out the dirty work, but the real strings are being pulled higher up, captains, maybe even local politicians." Naomi clenched her fists. This revelation left her both furious and burdened. "So, where do we start? I can't let this incident be swept under the rug. Mills has to be held accountable." Reed nodded, determination flashing in his eyes. "We'll do this the right way. But you need to know, Naomi, this won't be easy. Once you go after Mills, he won't sit quietly. He knows how to maneuver, and he has powerful allies." Naomi exhaled deeply, but her gaze remained resolute. "He might know how to maneuver, but I'm not afraid. I've faced worse before, and this time, I'm not letting them win." Towards the end of their conversation, Reed revealed more. Mills had been implicated in several cases of excessive force that were covered up by the system. Moreover, he was believed to have taken bribes to ignore criminal activities from local gangs, making him a critical part of the corruption network. Reed handed Naomi an old case file containing complaints against Mills. Although the evidence wasn't sufficient for a conviction, it was a starting point for a deeper investigation. Naomi took the file, her eyes blazing with determination. She knew this battle wouldn't be easy, but she also knew she wasn't alone. With Reed's support, she was determined to expose not just Mills, but the entire network behind him. "They picked the wrong person to mess with," Naomi said, her voice low but powerful. Reed gave a small, approving smile and nodded. "Then let's start from here." Naomi wasted no time. As soon as she returned to her apartment after meeting with Reed, she sat at her desk, powered up her computer, and began digging up every piece of information she could find about Jordan Mills. With her elite investigative skills and relentless determination, she knew she had to uncover the truth, not just to protect herself, but to dismantle the corrupt system Mills and those backing him had built. Every click unveiled new layers of information, but also more questions. Mills's records were riddled with irregularities. She found over a dozen reports concerning his unnecessary use of force, most targeting individuals from minority communities. Strangely, the majority of these reports had been dismissed or handled internally in suspiciously discreet ways. Naomi delved deeper, uncovering that Mills had been involved in several high-profile lawsuits, none of which ever made it to court. Evidence had gone missing, witnesses had withdrawn, and the files were incomplete in ways that were too consistent to be mere coincidence. It became evident to Naomi that Mills wasn't acting alone. The system had been shielding him. The more she researched, the more Naomi unearthed questionable financial transactions. Several large sums of money had been transferred into Mills's accounts from obscure sources. Some were disguised as charitable donations or performance bonuses from small corporate entities, but in reality, they were linked to businesses involved in major smuggling and drug trafficking operations. While reviewing old reports, Naomi came across the name of a woman, Alicia Carter, a single mother who had accused Mills of assaulting her during a traffic stop. According to the file, Alicia had withdrawn her complaint after being persuaded by the police department's legal counsel. Yet her medical records indicated she had suffered broken ribs and severe bruising during the incident, injuries far too serious to be dismissed as a misunderstanding. Naomi decided to reach out to Alicia. After several calls and some gentle persuasion, Naomi finally arranged to meet her at a small cafe on the outskirts of the city. Alicia, a young woman with tired eyes and a wary expression, sat across from Naomi. Her hands trembled as she held her coffee cup, still visibly fearful at the mention of Mills. "You know he won't leave me alone," Alicia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jordan Mills. He has power. He knows how to silence people." Naomi nodded, trying to build trust. "I understand your fear, but I need your help, not just to expose him, but to stop him from hurting others." Alicia hesitated, her eyes darting around the room as if afraid someone might be watching. Finally, she lowered her voice and recounted the incident in vivid detail. "He pulled me over without cause. When I asked why, he got angry and told me not to argue. I didn't back down, and he dragged me out of the car, threw me to the ground. He beat me right in front of my son." Her voice cracked and tears streamed down her face. "I tried to report him, but someone from the police department came to my house and told me to drop it, or I'd regret it." In addition to her account, Alicia revealed she knew of another woman, Mary Jenkins, who had also been a victim of Mills, but had been coerced into silence after receiving threats. Alicia agreed to help Naomi locate Mary to strengthen the case. Mary Jenkins, though initially terrified, eventually agreed to testify, providing details about how Mills used his authority to manipulate victims and force them to withdraw their complaints. Alicia's story was not just a testament to Mills's violence, but also a stark illustration of the system that protected him. He didn't just use brute force. He weaponized fear to control his victims, with backing from higher-ups and colleagues. Naomi documented Alicia's account and promised she wouldn't let the matter be forgotten. "You're not alone, Alicia. I'll do everything in my power to bring him to justice." Alicia nodded, a faint glimmer of hope in her weary eyes. "If you can do that, I'll stand with you. But I'm scared, Naomi. I'm scared they'll come after me again." Naomi placed her hand over Alicia's, her gaze firm and resolute. "I'll protect you. But first, we have to bring the truth to light." Naomi left the cafe armed with more crucial information. She now understood that Mills wasn't just a corrupt cop. He was a pawn in a larger, more powerful system of protection and cover-ups. But she also knew that every step forward would bring greater resistance and danger. Looking out at the bustling streets, Naomi resolved. This battle had only just begun. Naomi stepped out of the cafe, her hand gripping the notebook containing Alicia Carter's testimony. Alicia's story not only shed light on Jordan Mills's violence, but also served as a stark reminder of the toxic system Naomi was fighting to expose. Her eyes scanned the street, A strange feeling crept into her mind. She was being watched. On her way home, the rearview mirror reflected a black SUV following her at an unsettling distance. Naomi deliberately turned down a small side street, but the SUV stayed close. She didn't panic. Instead, her FBI instincts guided her actions. As she approached a traffic light, Naomi suddenly slowed down, forcing the SUV to overtake her. She quickly noted its license plate before turning onto a different route. The unease in her chest grew, but Naomi refused to let fear take hold. She knew her investigation had touched nerves, and those protecting their secrets were willing to go to great lengths to stop her. A few days later, Naomi found an unmarked envelope in her mailbox. Inside was a photograph of her speaking with Alicia at the cafe, accompanied by a handwritten note. "Stop, or you'll regret it." The menace in the crude handwriting was palpable, but instead of intimidating her, it only strengthened her resolve. She sent the photo to the FBI lab for analysis and reported the incident to Marcus Reed. "They know what you're doing," Reed said over the phone, his voice grave. "You need to be careful, Naomi. This isn't just a standard investigation anymore." That evening, Naomi returned to her apartment after a long day of investigating. The small space was unusually quiet, the hallway light casting shadows through the window. She set her bag on the table and was about to grab her laptop when she noticed something strange. The living room window was ajar, even though she was certain she had locked it before leaving. Naomi stood in front of the mirror, staring at her tired reflection. The threats she had received were impossible to ignore. Reed had reminded her to prioritize her safety, even suggesting she pause the investigation to avoid further danger. But Naomi knew that stepping back now would render all her efforts meaningless. Faced with a choice, her safety or continuing to uncover the truth, Naomi felt the weight of tension pressing on her. She picked up her phone, her fingers scrolling through her contacts until she landed on Reed's number. She thought about calling him to say she would take a step back, but then the images of people like Alicia Carter, Reed, and all the other victims flashed through her mind. Naomi set the phone down and took a deep breath. "Not now," she whispered to herself. "I can't let them win." Her heart pounded, but Naomi didn't let fear dictate her actions. She quietly opened a nearby drawer and retrieved her Glock 19, then moved cautiously through each room. A faint noise from the kitchen made her pause. With a swift, practiced movement, Naomi pressed herself against the wall, gun raised. Just as she prepared to step into the kitchen, a figure lunged at her. Naomi reacted instinctively, dodging the attack and sweeping her leg out, sending the intruder to the floor. The man, wearing a hooded sweatshirt, tried to scramble to his feet, but Naomi had her gun trained on him before he could act. "Stay where you are. Hands on your head," Naomi commanded, her voice cold and steady. The man hesitated but eventually complied. Before Naomi could question him, he pulled a small smoke bomb from his pocket and tossed it to the ground. Thick smoke engulfed the room. Naomi coughed, trying to keep her eyes open, but by the time the smoke cleared, the intruder was gone. Naomi sank into a chair, her mind racing. This wasn't just a warning anymore, this was an attack. Whoever was behind Mills didn't just know about her investigation. They were willing to use violence to stop her. She called Reed immediately and recounted the event. "They don't just want to scare me," Naomi said, her voice icy. "They want to eliminate me." Reed was silent for a moment before replying. "Naomi, you're up against a network that's more than just corrupt. They'll do whatever it takes to protect themselves. I think we need to accelerate our efforts before they strike again." Naomi nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "If they think I'll stop because of this, they're wrong. I'll make them pay." Naomi knew this fight had gone beyond a personal grudge. The people behind Mills and his network weren't just manipulating the system. They were using violence to maintain their power. But Naomi also knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't back down. After tidying up her apartment, Naomi retrieved her laptop and began outlining her next steps. The darkness outside her window seemed to loom, but this time she was ready for the battle ahead. The faint morning light filtered through the apartment window as Naomi stepped out, her neatly fitted FBI jacket accentuating her strong frame. The previous night, she had spent hours reviewing every detail of the investigation. Alicia's testimony, the hidden reports, and the attack on her apartment had all connected to paint a clearer picture of the corruption network that Jordan Mills was a part of. But Naomi needed more. She needed a confession from him. Naomi walked into the police station, the atmosphere seemingly freezing as she entered. Curious yet wary glances from the officers in the hallway passed over her, but Naomi didn't care. She was focused on one target, Jordan Mills. She stopped in front of the officers' break room. The door was slightly ajar, revealing Mills seated in a chair, laughing and joking with a colleague. He looked confident, at ease, as though nothing could touch him. But when his eyes met Naomi's, his smile vanished instantly. "What are you doing here?" Mills asked, standing up, his tone cold but laced with unease. Naomi stepped in, her eyes fixed on him. "I'm here to talk to you, Mills, about what you've done." Mills smirked, folding his arms across his chest. "Oh? I don't recall doing anything wrong." Naomi pulled a file from her pocket and slammed it onto the table. "Do these names ring a bell? Alicia Carter, Michael Daniels, and many others. People you've attacked, threatened, and silenced." Mills glanced at the file before returning his gaze to Naomi, his expression defiant. "You think a pile of papers will do anything? I've heard stories like this my whole life. You've got nothing on me." Naomi didn't back down. "Don't get too comfortable, Mills. I have testimony from one of your victims. I've also been tracking your financial transactions. Those unexplainable sums from shady businesses, they're not going unnoticed anymore. Do you think this will be ignored forever?" Mills narrowed his eyes, though his expression remained defiant. "You don't understand. This system is built to protect people like me. Try all you want, but in the end, you won't accomplish anything." Naomi stepped closer, her gaze piercing. "The system may have protected you before, but not this time. They've picked the wrong person to challenge." Mills smirked, but the flicker of worry in his eyes betrayed him. "You think you're special? You think you can break something that's crushed everyone else before you?" Naomi observed his reaction and then spoke, her voice low but commanding. "Why don't you tell the truth, Mills? You're just a pawn, aren't you? So who's pulling the strings?" Her question made Mills freeze momentarily. Though he tried to mask it, the hesitation in his eyes was evident. Naomi knew she had struck a nerve. "You don't know what you're doing," Mills said, his voice lower now, almost a warning. "If I say anything, I'll be destroyed. They won't spare me, and I can promise you they won't spare you either." Naomi leaned in slightly, her eyes locked onto his evasive gaze. "Who are they? A captain? A commander? Or someone even higher?" Mills didn't answer, staring back at her with a mixture of fear and anger. "You'll never understand. This isn't a fight you can win." Naomi straightened up, grabbing the file. "You're wrong, Mills. I'm not fighting alone, and I won't stop until I bring this entire corrupt system down." She turned and walked out, leaving Mills standing silently in the room. He tried to maintain his outward confidence, but Naomi could tell she had planted fear in his mind. Mills wasn't just afraid for himself. He was terrified of those he answered to. As Naomi exited the station, a swirl of emotions rose within her. Mills's veiled warnings confirmed what Reed had cautioned her about. This wasn't just a battle against one corrupt officer, but against an entire network of power lurking in the shadows. But instead of discouraging her, it only fueled Naomi's determination. She knew she had touched something much bigger, and she was ready to face it head-on. Naomi stepped out of the police station, the midday sun shining on her face, but doing little to ease the tension in her chest. Jordan Mills's words echoed in her mind. "If I talk, I'll be destroyed." It wasn't just an excuse. It was a confession that Mills was being controlled by a much larger force. As Naomi considered her next move, her phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number. "This is Harper," she answered, her tone calm. "We need to talk," a deep, hurried voice said. It was Mills. "I have information, but you need to guarantee my safety." Naomi frowned, her eyes scanning her surroundings cautiously. "Why should I trust you? How do I know this isn't a trap? You have no reason to trust me." Mills exhaled sharply. "But if you want to uncover the truth about this network, I'm your only chance." That afternoon, Naomi arranged to meet Mills at a small cafe outside the city. It was a location she had carefully selected, far enough to avoid surveillance, yet close enough to maintain control of the situation if anything went wrong. Sitting silently in her car, Naomi stared through the windshield at the cafe. Her mind wrestled with the decision. Cooperating with someone like Mills wasn't just an ethical dilemma, but a significant risk. If he was lying, the entire investigation could be compromised. She glanced at the phone beside her, debating whether to call Reed and go over the plan again. But part of her knew this was a unique opportunity to move forward. Naomi gripped the steering wheel, her palms damp with sweat. "Mills isn't my ally," she whispered, "but he might be the key to breaking this system." Taking a deep breath, Naomi stepped out of the car. Each step toward the cafe felt heavy, but her eyes burned with determination. Mills appeared in plain clothes, looking more tired and anxious than he had that morning. He sat across from Naomi, his eyes darting around as if weighing his words. "I need a deal," Mills began, his voice rough. "If I tell you everything I know, you have to guarantee my protection." Naomi stared at him, her skepticism unhidden. "You think I'll negotiate with you after everything you've done? You've assaulted, threatened, and hurt countless people." Mills swallowed hard, sweat beading on his forehead. "I know, and I'm not proud of it. But you don't understand. I didn't have a choice. They control everything. I'm just a pawn in their hands." Naomi leaned forward, her voice low but commanding. "Who are they? Mills, I need names." Mills glanced around the cafe nervously, as if afraid someone was watching. He lowered his voice to a near whisper. "Captain Richard Vaughn and Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Brooks," Mills said, his eyes filled with worry. "They're the ones in charge. Vaughn controls operations within the police department, from assigning cases to covering up evidence. Brooks works with outsiders, politicians, corporations, even gangs in the city." Naomi felt anger boiling inside her as she heard the names. Both Vaughn and Brooks were prominent figures, celebrated as pillars of the police department and the community. But now, their true nature was clear. Men who exploited their power to protect themselves and oppress others. "Do you have proof?" Naomi asked, her gaze sharp. Mills nodded, his voice trembling. "I have some documents, emails, and bank transactions, but I can't hold on to them much longer. If they find out I'm cooperating with you, I won't live to see tomorrow." Naomi stared at Mills for a long moment, weighing his offer. She knew this could be the breakthrough she needed for her investigation, but she didn't forget that Mills had betrayed countless others to save himself. "I'll agree," Naomi said, her voice firm. "But if you try to deceive me, I'll be the last person you'll have to deal with. And trust me, I won't hold back." Mills took a deep breath, his expression a mix of fear and relief. "I don't have another choice. You have to believe me this time." Naomi stood, her eyes fixed on him. "You'd better hope I don't find a reason to regret this." As Naomi left the cafe, she felt like she was holding a double-edged sword. The information Mills provided could be the key to dismantling the corruption network, but it could also be a trap. She knew she couldn't fully trust him, but she also had no other choice. Standing in the parking lot, Naomi pulled out her phone and called Marcus Reed. "I have names," she said tersely. "Vaughn and Brooks." There was a brief silence on the other end before Reed replied, his voice low and cautious. "This is going to be a big fight, Naomi. But if we can take those two down, we might finally have a real chance to make a difference." Naomi gripped the phone tightly, her eyes blazing with determination. "I'm ready." Naomi wasted no time. Right after she met with Jordan Mills, she and Reed began analyzing the information they had just gathered. The names Mills had provided weren't just high-ranking officers. They were powerful individuals with influence that extended far beyond the police department. At the FBI office, Naomi and Reed buried themselves in documents, piecing the evidence together into a clearer picture. The financial transactions of Vaughn and Brooks began to reveal a vast corruption network involving local businesses and criminal gangs. Naomi felt as if she were overturning a massive stone, only to find countless insects crawling beneath it. "We need more evidence," Reed said, his tone thoughtful. "Mills is just the beginning. Without something concrete, Vaughn and Brooks will walk free like they always have." Naomi nodded. "We need to get out there and dig up more leads, even if it means taking risks." As Naomi and Reed prepared to escalate the investigation to the field, an unexpected development occurred. Their colleague, Agent Linda Chase, who often worked alongside Naomi on major cases, began exhibiting suspicious behavior. Known for her diligence and loyalty, Linda suddenly seemed particularly interested in the investigation. Linda Chase wasn't simply coerced by the corruption network. She also had personal grievances against Naomi. A brief flashback could explain how Linda had often felt overshadowed by Naomi in their past cases. While Vaughn's pressure played a role, Linda's simmering resentment made her more susceptible to manipulation. Moreover, Linda wasn't just leaking plans. She actively monitored Naomi's movements and reported them back to Vaughn, creating significant roadblocks in the investigation. This added depth to Linda's character, making her not just a betrayer, but a complex figure in the narrative. "I hear you're investigating some big names in the department," Linda said, her tone light, but her eyes sharp. "Need any help?" Naomi hesitated, but Linda's enthusiasm made her decide to keep critical information under wraps. "Thanks, but we're managing fine. I'll let you know if we need anything." Linda smiled, but there was a fleeting, unnatural glint in her eyes. Naomi noticed it, but at the time, she didn't have enough reason to act on her suspicions. 2 days later, Naomi and Reed conducted a field investigation at an abandoned warehouse, rumored to be a site for illicit transactions tied to Vaughn and Brooks. Mills had informed them that this was one of the key locations for hiding documents and evidence. As night fell, Naomi and Reed approached the warehouse. Both were dressed in plain clothes and armed for protection. Naomi led the way, her gun steady in her grip as they carefully navigated the darkened paths. Suddenly, a faint noise came from the far side of the warehouse. Reed motioned for Naomi to stop, but before they could react, gunfire erupted, flashes of light bursting from multiple directions. "It's an ambush!" Reed shouted, pulling Naomi behind a stack of wooden crates. Naomi tightened her grip on her gun, her mind racing. How did they know we'd be here? "The plan was leaked," Reed replied, his breathing heavy. The relentless barrage of bullets pinned them down, but Naomi knew they couldn't hold their position for long. She quickly called for backup on her radio, signaling Reed to prepare for a retreat. "We can't stay trapped here," Naomi said, her eyes filled with determination. With coordinated movements, Naomi and Reed worked to break through the ambush, using the darkness and terrain to their advantage. They made their way toward an emergency exit, firing back as needed. By the time the FBI backup team arrived, their attackers had vanished, but the damage was clear. Their plan had been compromised. Back at the FBI office, Naomi and Reed urgently reviewed all their data. The trail led them to an unthinkable discovery. Linda Chase was the one who had leaked the information to Vaughn and Brooks. "That's impossible," Reed said, shaking his head. "Linda has worked with us for years. Why would she do this?" Naomi closed her eyes, trying to suppress her anger. "We don't know if she was forced or if it was voluntary, but it doesn't matter. She betrayed us, and now Vaughn's network knows what we're doing." Naomi decided to confront Linda directly. In the office, when Naomi questioned her about her involvement in the ambush, Linda's unease was palpable. "I don't know what you're talking about," Linda stammered, her voice shaky. "Don't lie to me," Naomi said, her tone firm. "We've traced your communications with Vaughn. Why, Linda? Why did you do this?" Linda lowered her head, saying nothing. But when she looked back up at Naomi, there was a deep fear in her eyes. "I didn't have a choice," Linda said quietly. "They threatened me, and my family." Naomi walked away from the conversation with a heavy heart. Betrayal from within was the last thing she had expected, but it also underscored the level of danger they were up against. Vaughn and Brooks weren't just powerful. They knew how to exploit fear to control everything around them. But Naomi refused to let this shake her resolve. Staring at the computer screen, she said quietly to Reed, "They've warned us. Now it's our turn to make them regret it." Naomi sat in her office, the glow of the computer screen reflecting on her face. After Linda Chase's betrayal, she and Reed became even more cautious. Every action and every piece of information processed was secured with the utmost confidentiality. The surprise ambush confirmed one thing. Vaughn and Brooks were not only powerful, but also exceptionally resourceful. Yet Naomi knew that no matter how difficult it got, she couldn't stop. "We need more evidence," Reed said, urgency in his voice. "What Mills gave us is a good start, but it's not enough to bring down the whole network." Naomi nodded, her eyes fixed on the screen. "We need a bold move. If we want to take them down, we have to make them trap themselves." Naomi and Reed worked tirelessly, gathering more testimonies from witnesses and digging through old documents tied to Vaughn and Brooks. With Mills's help, they uncovered suspicious transactions between Vaughn and several businesses, with funds disguised as community support grants. A new witness came forward, Darrell Lawson, a former police officer who had worked under Vaughn. Lawson had resigned after being forced to participate in evidence cover-ups. In his testimony, Lawson revealed that Vaughn frequently held secret meetings at a warehouse on the outskirts of town, where illicit money exchanges and illegal deals took place. "Vaughn thinks he's untouchable," Lawson said, his voice bitter. "He believes no one would dare go after him. But if you're brave enough, you can bring him down." Naomi decided to use Lawson's information to set up an ambush. She pretended to contact Vaughn through an indirect channel, proposing a deal. The premise was that Naomi was willing to side with him in exchange for protection from the troubles she was facing. Reed, though concerned, agreed with the plan. "This is our best shot," he said, his eyes focused. "But it's incredibly dangerous. If Vaughn suspects anything, he won't just decline. He'll try to eliminate you." Naomi simply smiled, her eyes shining with determination. "I won't let them get rid of me that easily. Get our team ready. I want Vaughn to have no way out." That evening, Naomi drove to the warehouse Lawson had mentioned. The location was in a desolate area, almost forgotten. Everything was meticulously prepared. A fully equipped FBI team lay hidden in the shadows, ready to act on her signal. Vaughn arrived on time, driving a luxurious car and accompanied by only one bodyguard. He stepped out with his usual air of confidence, his eyes scanning Naomi as she stood waiting outside. "Agent Harper," Vaughn said, his voice cold with a hint of mockery. "I hear you want to negotiate. I must admit, I'm intrigued." Naomi maintained her composure, showing no trace of unease. "I think we both know when it's wise to cooperate for mutual benefit," she said, her tone calm but firm. Vaughn smirked and stepped closer. "I'm surprised at how quickly your attitude has changed, but I'm not one to trust easily. What proof do you have that you're serious?" Naomi stared him down, deliberately letting the moment out as if weighing her options. Then she gestured toward the trunk of her car. "I have some critical documents, but I won't hand them over unless I'm sure we've reached an agreement." Vaughn frowned, but eventually motioned for his bodyguard to check. That was the moment Naomi had been waiting for. "Now!" Naomi shouted, giving the signal to the FBI team. Powerful flashlights pierced the darkness as the FBI agents emerged from every direction. Vaughn and his bodyguard were surrounded in an instant, with no chance to escape. "You play a clever game, Harper," Vaughn said, his voice filled with anger, though he tried to mask it with feigned calm. Naomi stepped closer to him, meeting his gaze. "You made the mistake of thinking you were untouchable. Now, everyone will see who you are." Vaughn was handcuffed and taken away, but Naomi knew this was only one step in a long journey. Brooks was still out there, and people like him wouldn't relinquish power so easily. But tonight, Naomi had secured an important victory, a significant step forward in the fight against injustice. Standing outside the warehouse, Naomi watched as the convoy of FBI vehicles drove away. She didn't feel at ease, but the fire of determination burned brightly within her. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. The neon lights of the FBI headquarters sign reflected through the conference room window as Naomi Harper, dressed in casual attire, but with a fiery determination in her eyes, stepped into Reed's office. The successful ambush had brought Captain Richard Vaughn to justice, but Naomi knew this victory was only the beginning. People like Brooks and the system backing Vaughn wouldn't be easy to dismantle. In the following days, headlines were dominated by news of Vaughn's arrest. Public outrage grew over the extent of corruption and abuse of power within the police department, but Naomi faced unexpected repercussions. Immediately after Vaughn's arrest, Naomi received notice from her superiors. She was suspended pending an internal investigation. The official reason cited was that she had acted beyond her authority and endangered the lives of other agents during the ambush. Naomi clenched the notice in her hand, her breathing heavy. "They're trying to silence me," she told Reed in a private meeting. "This isn't about breaking protocol. This is about protecting themselves." Reed nodded, his expression grim. They want to discredit you before you can go any further. This is their way of keeping everything under control. Despite her suspension, Naomi refused to give up. She continued working behind the scenes, maintaining contact with witnesses like Alicia Carter and Mills while coordinating with a legal team to ensure Vaughn's case wouldn't be swept under the rug. Meanwhile, public attention turned to the police department. Videos of Vaughn's arrest and witness testimonies quickly spread across social media, fueling outrage. Protests erupted outside police headquarters with banners reading, "Justice for all. Demand transparency." Initially, the police department tried to ease the pressure by announcing minor measures like mandatory training on emotional control and ethical conduct for officers. However, these efforts were dismissed as performative, failing to address the root causes of corruption and discrimination. As Naomi focused on fighting the system from within, Noah Carter, Alicia's ex-husband and a skilled attorney, decided to take the battle to the public. With the backing of human rights organizations, Noah filed a lawsuit against the police department, accusing them of enabling systemic racism and abuse of power. "This isn't just about Alicia," Noah declared at a press conference. "This is about everyone who has been trampled by this system. We won't stop until justice is served." Noah's lawsuit targeted not only Vaughn, but also exposed illegal actions by other officers, including Brooks. The evidence Naomi and Reed had gathered from Mills and Lawson played a critical role in strengthening the case. Meanwhile, Brooks began to feel pressure mounting from all sides. He tried leveraging his political connections to divert public attention, but his efforts were futile as the demands for clear answers grew louder. Naomi, though suspended, kept a close watch on every development. When Reed updated her from the FBI office, she simply said, "Brooks will pay. I'll make sure of it." Noah's legal battle marked a major turning point when the court ordered the police department to hand over all documents related to Vaughn and Brooks. Among these documents, unexpected evidence emerged, revealing that Brooks was not only corrupt but also engaged in financial dealings with criminal organizations. With the support of the legal team, Naomi and Reed quickly linked the new evidence to the network they were investigating. Piece by piece, the full picture of a corrupt, racially biased system came into focus. Despite her suspension, Naomi knew her fight wasn't in vain. Protests continued. Noah's press conferences gained widespread public support, and the pressure on the police department grew heavier with each passing day. Standing by her apartment window, Naomi looked down at the bustling street below, where neon signs reading "Justice for All" glowed brightly in the night. She took a deep breath, her eyes filled with determination. "This fight isn't over," she whispered to herself. "I won't stop." Late at night, Naomi sat in front of her computer screen, the faint blue light from the documents casting shadows across her face. Each piece of the case led her deeper into the dark layers of the corruption network that Vaughn and Brooks were part of. The documents gathered by Noah and the legal team, combined with testimony from Mills and other witnesses, began to reveal a chilling truth. This network didn't just operate within the police department, it extended to the highest levels of city government. Reed entered the office with a new file in hand. He placed it on Naomi's desk, his expression tense. "You need to see this. It won't make you happy." Naomi opened the file. Inside were copies of emails between Brooks and several city officials, discussing how to cover up funds from shady construction contracts and funnel them into illegal activities. "This isn't just corruption," Naomi said coldly. "They're using this system to maintain power and crush anyone who stands against them. Naomi and Reed quickly realized that some high-ranking city officials, including Deputy Mayor Harold Quinn and Chief Financial Officer Susan Blake, were deeply tied to Brooks. Quinn, who appeared to be a respected leader, was in fact behind the legalization of these illicit funds. Susan Blake, in charge of the city's financial audits, used her authority to bury the transactions. "This isn't just corruption," Reed said. "This is a tightly structured organization, top to bottom. They've built an entire system to protect themselves." Naomi nodded. "And if we keep digging, they'll do everything they can to stop us." Soon after Naomi and Reed delved deeper into their investigation, signs of obstruction began to emerge. Naomi's requests for documents were delayed or denied without explanation. Some witnesses she planned to interview either changed their stories or disappeared altogether. One evening, as Naomi returned home, she found an unmarked envelope in her mailbox. Inside was a single piece of paper with the words, "Stop before it's too late." Naomi clenched the note in her hand, her eyes blazing. "They think they can scare me," she told Reed later. "But they're wrong." As Naomi pressed on with the investigation, Deputy Mayor Harold Quinn held a press conference, publicly criticizing her. "These allegations are baseless and damaging to the reputation of our city," Quinn declared, his tone dignified. "I believe this is an effort by a few individuals to sow division and undermine public trust." Naomi watched the press conference from Reed's office, her gaze dark. "Quinn is trying to turn public opinion against us," she said. "He knows we're closing in on their network." Despite Quinn's attempts to deflect, the documents and information from Naomi's investigation began to circulate on social media. Public trust in the city government continued to erode, and protests grew more frequent. "We need a big move," Reed said. "Something undeniable to hold Quinn and Blake accountable." Naomi nodded quietly. "We'll find it. And when we do, no one will be able to protect them." During a late-night investigation, Naomi and Reed uncovered an encrypted email on Vaughn's hard drive. After decrypting it, they found a list of payments transferred from offshore accounts to Quinn and Blake. The list not only proved their involvement, but also revealed that some of the funds had been used to finance illegal activities, including human trafficking. "This is what we need," Naomi said, her voice resolute. "This is the evidence that can take down their entire system." Naomi and Reed knew they were at a dangerous crossroads. Every step closer to the truth brought them nearer to the city's most powerful figures, people who would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. But Naomi didn't waver. Standing by her office window, she looked out over the city, shrouded in darkness, while the lights from the protests below glowed brightly. "We're going to bring this entire system down," she said, her eyes burning with determination. "And they won't be able to escape." Naomi stood in the office, her eyes locked on the computer screen. The newly uncovered evidence had brought them to the brink of a breakthrough. The corrupt system, orchestrated by Vaughn, Brooks, Quinn, and Blake, was on the verge of collapse. Yet she couldn't shake the gnawing feeling of unease in her chest. She knew that, as they edged closer to the truth, the danger would only escalate. Reed, as usual, entered the room with a cup of coffee in hand, a faint smile on his face. "We've come so far, Naomi," he said. "They're scared. I can feel it." Naomi tried to return the smile, but something deep inside her felt wrong. "Reed, we need to be more careful. They've shown they're willing to do anything to protect themselves." Reed nodded, his expression firm. "We've known that from the start. But if we don't act, who will?" That night, Naomi and Reed split up to investigate two new locations identified in the documents as potential storage sites for further evidence of the network's illegal dealings. Reed went alone to a warehouse on the outskirts of town, while Naomi stayed in the office to continue combing through files. About an hour later, Naomi's phone rang. She saw Reed's number and quickly answered. But instead of his familiar voice, there was only an ominous silence on the other end. "Reed, are you okay?" Naomi asked, her voice thick with concern. A cold voice replied, "You're going too far, Harper. This is your final warning." Naomi froze. She realized Reed had been followed, and now he was in danger. She rushed out of the office, calling for FBI backup, but by the time she reached the warehouse it was too late. Reed lay motionless on the cold concrete floor, a fatal wound in his chest. Medics did their best, but there was nothing they could do. Naomi knelt beside him, her hands trembling. "Reed, I'm so sorry," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. In the days that followed, Naomi barely left her apartment. Guilt consumed her for dragging Reed into this fight. He had always been her most loyal partner, unafraid to face danger for the cause of justice. And now, he had paid the ultimate price. Naomi stared at a photograph of her and Reed from an old investigation, her heart aching. "I've failed," she murmured. But then, like a spark in the darkness, she remembered Reed's last words. "If we don't act, who will?" Wiping her tears away, Naomi felt her guilt transform into determination. "I won't let your sacrifice be in vain," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. Naomi returned to the FBI office, where grief over Reed's death was palpable, but she knew that stopping now would render all their efforts meaningless. One evening, Naomi sat in her dimly lit apartment, staring at Reed's photograph, her eyes swollen from hours of crying. The fight had taken away her closest ally, and for the first time she doubted whether she had the strength to go on. Her phone buzzed. It was a voicemail from Reed, left before his fatal mission. Naomi played it, and his steady, warm voice filled the room. "Naomi, if you're hearing this, something's gone wrong. But don't stop. We've come too far to turn back now. You're stronger than you think. Don't let anything hold you back." Naomi paused, her vision blurred with tears. She realized she was at a crossroads. Continue down this perilous path or step back to save herself. But Reed's words reminded her that his sacrifice wasn't meaningless. She wiped her eyes and stared at Reed's photo. "You're right," she whispered. "If I stop now, I'll never forgive myself." In a private meeting with the remaining team, Naomi addressed them, her voice firm and unwavering. "Reed sacrificed himself so we could get closer to the truth. If we stop now, we're not just betraying him. We're betraying everyone who has suffered at the hands of this network." The room fell silent, but then, one by one, her colleagues nodded in agreement. They knew Naomi was right. Naomi and her team doubled down, meticulously consolidating evidence and devising new strategies to expose the network. She was no longer the same Naomi as before. She was now a woman hardened by loss, pain, and an unyielding resolve to ensure justice prevailed. Standing at Reed's grave site, the wind gently rustled the trees around her. She placed a bouquet on the ground, her eyes fixed on the inscription. "Marcus Reed, a friend, a warrior, a hero. I won't stop, Reed," she whispered. "I promise." As she turned and walked away, her heart heavy but her resolve unshaken, Naomi knew her battle was far from over. In truth, it was only just beginning. The early morning chill brushed through Naomi's hair as she stepped out of the courthouse where Richard Vaughn, Samuel Brooks, and a slew of other corrupt officers had just been formally indicted. The evidence Naomi and her team had painstakingly gathered combined with the pressure from protests and public support, had forced the justice system to act. In the crowd outside the courthouse, Naomi spotted Alicia Carter, Mary Jenkins, and other victims of the system, applauding and cheering. They had become the faces of the justice movement, proven that truth could spark change. Daryl Lawson, who had testified and aided the investigation, was being hailed by the press as one of the brave individuals who dared to stand against injustice. Standing beside Naomi, he reminded her that even within the system, people were fighting for a better future. Linda Chase, after being exposed, had quietly left the city. Naomi received a letter from her in which Linda apologized for her betrayal and warned Naomi that the system still harbored even more powerful figures. Naomi held the letter in her hand, her expression resolute, treating it as a reminder of the complexity of the fight ahead. The faces of the accused, once arrogant, now betrayed their tension as the judge read out the charges. Vaughn and Brooks no longer carried their usual smug confidence. They were now men surrounded by a litany of undeniable accusations, each charge cutting away at the facade of their power. Naomi stood in the back of the courtroom, refraining from joining the cheers of activists outside. She knew this was a victory, but it was far from the end. That evening, Naomi returned to the FBI office. Her colleagues hosted a small gathering to celebrate, but the atmosphere remained somber. There were fleeting smiles, but everyone understood the heavy price of this victory. Reed, Naomi's most loyal partner, wasn't there to witness it. Reed had fallen to bring them to this moment, but Naomi knew he would never want her to stop. When Naomi returned to her apartment, an unaddressed envelope lay at her door. She picked it up cautiously, her eyes scanning as she opened it. Inside was a small card with a chilling message. "You've won this time, but don't forget, this system won't collapse as easily as you think. We're always watching." No signature, no trace, but the message was clear. It wasn't just a warning. It was a threat, a reminder that Naomi's fight had only just begun. She stared at the card for a long moment, feeling the anger and danger embedded within it. But instead of fear, Naomi felt a surge of determination rises within her. Stepping onto her balcony, she gazed out at the city lights stretching across the darkness like ribbons of hope. From there, she could see both chaos and resolve. Beneath the street lights, people continued to fight, protest, and demand change. She knew Vaughn and Brooks were only the tip of the iceberg. Countless others were lurking in the shadows, using their power to manipulate and protect their interests. But she also knew that every small step she and her team had taken had begun to shake the foundation of this corrupt system. Naomi clenched the card tightly, her eyes unyielding. "If you think I'll stop, you're mistaken," she whispered, her voice echoing in the stillness. The night deepened, but the city's lights continued to shine, reflecting in Naomi's eyes. She stood there, a sentinel over the city, unfazed by the darkness around her. Though the path ahead was fraught with danger, Naomi remained undeterred. With unwavering faith in justice and an unshakable resolve, she was ready to move forward. The story closed with an image of Naomi standing before the city, her silhouette stark against the night sky. Behind the silence of the moment was a powerful message. The fight for justice never truly ends, and the brave will always rise, no matter the odds. Naomi Harper's journey has shown us that justice is never an easy road. She endured sacrifices, faced unimaginable dangers, and stood against a rotten system. But the question remains, if you were in Naomi's position, would you have the courage to keep fighting despite the risks and losses? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. If you found this story inspiring, Don't forget to like, share this video with those who need to hear it, and subscribe to the channel to catch more stories like this. Naomi's journey may have reached its conclusion, but the fight for justice continues. Join us in making a difference. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.